Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome. I welcome you all to this lecture in the course Sandhi in Paninian grammar. We have already studied At Sandhi, Hal Sandhi and Visarga Sandhi. We have also studied some part of the Swadi Sandhi and we continue to study the next part of the Swadi Sandhi in this particular lecture. What is a Swadi Sandhi? Swadi Sandhi is a Sandhi which substitutes the Swadi suffixes, su, adi suffixes. And this substitution happens in the specific environment of deriving a final finished form called pada, which is embedded in the derivation of a sentence. So, here we have a template structure of a sentence in which there are three small square brackets within two big square brackets. These three square brackets within the two represent the padas. Each pada internally is composed of a prakriti and a pratyaya with the plus sign indicating the combining of both of them. So, the prakriti and the pratyaya, they make up a pada and the padas make up a sentence. As we have already seen, the definition of vakya is ekating vakyam. So, there has to be one thing at least in the padas, in the pratyayas. So, there is one pratyaya which is thing and the other pratyayas are sup. And the prakritis of ting and sup are dhatu and pratipadika respectively. Dhatu is mentioned as dha and pratipadika is mentioned as pra on the slide. So, this template structure of a sentence gives us the picture of the pratyayas sup, sup and ting on the right hand side of the prakriti in the pada. So, this sup is called swadi over here. So, if we consider this as a generic template of the sentence representing the earlier mentioned specific form of a sentence, we see that the right hand side, which is a pratyaya, which is a sup pratyaya over here, has got a final element which comes into contact with the first element in the second pada. This is the prakriti element. Similarly, the sup in the second pada comes into contact with the first element of the third pada, and then this final element in the second pada and also in the first pada, this gets modified by another element over here and also over here. This is modified in the environment of the first element in the second pada and this is modified because of the first element in the third pada. This is precisely what is called as Swadi Sandhi. This is what we have been studying so far. So Swadi is generally referring to a vibhakti defined by 14104. Vibhakti means sup and ting. Sup are 21 suffixes which are added after a pratipadika or a nominal root and are stated in 412. And ting suffixes, they are added after a verbal root or dhatu and they are stated in 3478. The term vibhakti also applies to some other suffixes, tral, etc. But as far as Swadi is concerned, they are only sup and things. So what is a Swadi sandhi once again? If you have Ramas plus Gramam plus Nayati, three padas where sa occurs at the end of the first pada followed by g in the second pada. So this sa gets substituted by ru first, then u, then and u gets substituted by o, and so we have Ramo, Gramam Gacchati or Nayati. Similarly, Ramena Gramas Gamyate. Once again, sa comes at the end of the second pada followed by g in Gamyate. So the same process happens and sa is substituted first by ru, then by u, then and u get substituted by o, and we have Ramena Gramo Gamyate as a sentence. These are the concrete examples of the Swadi Sandhi, and there are plenty of examples in the literature of this particular Swadi Sandhi. These are the sutras dealing with the Swadi Sandhi: Sasajushoruhu, Atorora Plutada Plute, and Hashicha. This we had seen before. In the previous lecture, we also saw Bhobhaghogo Apurvasya Yoshi and part of Hali Sarvesham, and we also looked at a part of Bhobhaghogo Apurvasya Yoshi. So Apurva in 8317 means the ru which is preceded by a, and by the word a, by the sound a, all 18 varieties are referred to, and so short a as well as long a, they both are the conditions, the environments for this sandhi to take place. And in the previous lecture we saw examples where a was the environment, short a was the environment. What remains to be seen is when a is the left hand side environment, what happens to be here. And this is what we are going to see in this particular lecture. So part of Hali Sarvesham is what we are going to study in this lecture, and then there are some other sutras, some exceptions that we also study in this particular lecture. Namely Rosupi, Rori, Dralope Purvasya Dirghonaha, Etaptados Sulopo Akoranai Samase Hali, Sochilope Chet Padapuranam, Pratamayo Purva Savarnaha, and Nadichi. Let us first study Bhobhagogho Apurvasya Yoshi. So Bhobhagogho Apurvasya Yoshi is 8317. Bhobhagogho Apurvasya Yoshi is 8317, and this sutra means immediately before ash, that is all vowels plus h plus semi-vowels plus consonants 5, 4 and 3, in place of ru, which comes immediately after a and which is also a part of bhos, bhagos and aghos, is substituted by ya. I repeat, immediately before ash, all vowels plus h plus semi-vowels plus class consonants 5, 4 and 3, in place of ru, which comes immediately after a and which is also a part of bhos, bhagos and aghos, is substituted by ya. So here are the examples. We have as plus ash, this is the input where sa appears at the end of this pada followed by preceded by a. Earlier we had seen examples where this sa was preceded by short a. Now we have long a. So as plus ash, this sa gets substituted by ru. So we have aru plus ash. Now 8317 applies and substitutes this ru by ya, I plus ash. This is the example. Then what happens? That next stage is what we are going to study now. So we have lopas shakalyasya 8319 which applies over here, which says that immediately before ash, in place of ya and va, which come immediately after a, substitute 0 or deletion in the view of the grammarian Shakalya. In a nutshell, this is the view only of Shakalya and not of any other grammarian, especially Panini, and therefore this is an option. So to reread, the meaning of the sutra is immediately before ash, in place of ya and va, which come immediately after a, substitute 0 or deletion optionally. So to put it in the form of an equation, we can say that if a plus ya or va plus ash, if this is the environment, then in place of ya or va, substitute 0. That means delete them. So you will get the output a plus 0 plus ash. And this is, however, optional output. In the other option, this particular form will be retained. And since ash also consists of consonants, here is another sutra which says hali sarvesham, which also applies in the same environment. So it says that in view of all grammarians, in place of ya, which comes immediately after a and which is part of bhos, bhagos and aghos, substitute 0 or deletion. I repeat, in view of all grammarians, in place of ya, which comes immediately after a and which is part of bhos, bhagos and aghos, substitute 0 or deletion. So to put it in the form of an equation, we can say that bho, bhago, agho, a plus ya plus hal. Eventually this means hush, and then the output generated is bho, bhago, agho, a plus 0 plus hal, eventually hush. So this is how the two sutras Lopashakalyasya and Hali Sarvesham will apply, and the end result would be something like this. On the left hand side we see ach as the right hand side environment, which is of course part of ash, and on the right hand side we see hush as the right hand side environment, which is also the remaining part of ash, in the environment of which ru is substituted by ya. So let us look at the left hand side first. If you have bho slash bhago slash agho slash a plus ya plus ach, this is the input, and the sutra bho bhago agho apurvasya yoshi 8317 applies and substitutes this ya by 0. And this is done optionally. So you can get this form as optional form as well. And now when we turn to the right hand side on the slide, we see that bho slash bhago slash agho slash a plus ya plus hal, that is hush. In this case ya gets substituted by 0 permanently by all, in view of all grammarians. So this is the output and there is no optional form when hush follows. There are some other sutras which we are not dealing with in this particular course, which also tell us that this year over here, this year and the earlier this year, they also become Laghu Prayatna Tara and so on. That we reserve for the next level course. Now here are the template examples. First we take the examples where ach is the right hand side environment. So we have as plus ach as the basic input. This sa gets substituted by ru, so we have aru plus ach, and this ru gets substituted by ya, so we have I plus ach, and then this I plus ach becomes the input, and then what happens? Then this ya gets substituted by 0 optionally. This is what states this particular set of examples, template examples. Let us look at it one by one. So first we have as plus a, and then sa becomes ru, aru plus a, then I plus a, and then this here gets optionally deleted. So we have 0 plus a slash I plus a as a returned example. Similarly, as plus a, and we have aru plus a, and then I plus a, and then a0 plus a optionally. Similarly, as plus e is the input, and then aru plus e is the next derived state, then I plus e is the next derived state, ru is derived by sasajisho ruhu, ya is substituting ru by bhobhagagho apurvasya yoshi, and then lopashakalya applies, and this here gets optionally deleted. So we have a0e optionally. Then you have as plus u, and then next aru plus u, then I plus u, and then we have a0 plus u optionally. Similarly, as plus ru is the basic input, from which is derived aru plus ru, and then I plus ru, and then a0 plus ru optionally. Then we have as plus lu, and aru plus lu, then I plus lu, and finally a0 plus lu optionally. Similarly, as plus a is the basic input, from which is generated aru plus a, from it is generated I plus a, and then lopashakalya applies and substitutes this here by 0, so we get a0 plus a optionally. Similarly, as plus o, and it gets substituted by aru plus o, and then I plus o, and then this here gets substituted by 0, so we have a0 plus o optionally derived form. Then we have as plus I as the basic input, from which is derived aru plus I, then ru is substituted by ya, so I plus I, and then lopashakalya applies and substitutes this here by 0, so we have a0 plus I optionally. And finally, as plus au is the basic input, from which is derived aru plus au, then I plus au, and finally a0 plus au optionally. These are the template examples, and now let us study the concrete specific examples which illustrate these templates. So first of all, let us look at as plus a, and here are the cases. Devas plus api. In this case, sa becomes ru, ru then becomes ya, and then this ya gets optionally deleted, and we have deva plus api. as optionally derived form. Then we have devas plus ahu, where as is followed by a. Then sa is substituted by ru by ya, and this ya is optionally deleted. So you have deva ahu. Similarly, devas plus iha, where as is followed by e. Sa is substituted by ru, then by ya, and finally this ya is deleted or substituted by 0. So we have deva plus iha optionally. Then we have devas plus uta, where sa is substituted by ru, then by ya, and finally this ya gets optionally deleted. So we get deva uta optionally. Similarly, deva ritam. Devas plus ritam is the basic input. Sa is substituted by ru is substituted by ya, and then finally this ya gets deleted and you get the form deva ritam optionally. Then we have devas plus lukaram. Sa is then substituted by ru, then by ya, and finally ya is optionally deleted. So we have deva plus lukaram. This is optionally derived form. Similarly, devas plus edhante, and we have deva ru plus edhante. Then ru is substituted by ya, and then ya is optionally deleted by 0, and so we get the form deva edhante. Then we have devas plus om, and then sa is substituted first by ru, then by ya, and then this ya gets deleted, and so we get the form deva plus om optionally. Then deva plus aikyam. So devas is the basic input, devas plus aikyam. Sa gets substituted by ru by sasajusho ruhu 8-66. Then ru gets substituted by ya, bho bhagavho apurvasya yoshi 8-3-17, and then this ya gets deleted optionally by lopashakalya 8-3-19. So we get deva plus aikyam with ya deleted, or devaya aikyam with ya retained. Similarly, devas plus aushadham. Sa is substituted by ru by ya, and then ya gets optionally deleted. So we get deva plus aushadham optionally. Similarly, bhos plus atman, and sa gets substituted by ru by ya, and ya is finally optionally deleted. So we have bho atman. Similarly, bhagos plus atman, and sa is substituted by ru by ya, and then ya is optionally deleted. So we get bhago atman. And finally, aghos plus atman. Sa is substituted by ru by the sutra sasajusho ruhu. Ru is substituted by ya by the sutra bho bhago agho apurvasya yoshi, and then ya gets optionally deleted by the sutra lopashakalyasya. So we have agho plus atman optionally. Now we have as plus hash. We have seen as plus ach. We already stated that if as is followed by ash, sa is substituted by ya. Now we have seen the examples where as was followed by ach. Now we have the example where as is followed by hash, and then sa is substituted by ru. So aru plus hash is the next step derived. Then from this we derive I plus hash, and then we apply Hali Sarvesham, and so this year gets deleted in view of all the grammarians. So there is no option. So here is the equation of this. As plus hush, sir gets substituted by ru by year, and then year gets deleted, year gets 0 substitution, and there is no optional form. Here are the examples. First is Shivas plus Hasanti, where her follows as. Sa appears at the end of the pada, so Sasajushoruhu applies, and then we get Shivaru plus Hasanti. Then Ru gets substituted by Ya, so we get Shivaya plus Hasanti by the sutra Bhovagho Apurvasya Yoshi, and then this Ya gets deleted permanently, and so we get only one form, Shiva Hasanti. Similarly, Shivas plus Yanti, so is substituted by Ru by Ya, and then finally Shiva Yanti. Then we have Shivas plus Vandyaha, and then Sa gets substituted by Ru by Ya, then we get Ya deleted, and so we get Shiva Vandyaha. Then we have Shivas plus Ramaha, so we have Shivaru plus Ramaha. Ru is substituted by Ya, so Shivaya plus Ramaha. Ya is optionally deleted, so we have Shivaya Ramaha and Shiva Ramaha. Then we have Shiva Labhaha. The input is Shivas Labhaha. Sa is substituted by Ru by Ya, and finally Ya is permanently deleted, so we get Shiva Labhaha. Then we have Shivas plus Nyungu Vire, where Sa is followed by Hush, namely Nya, and so this Sa gets substituted by Ru, then Ru by Ya, and then this Ya is substituted by 0 substitution. So we have Shiva plus Yungu Vire. Then Shiva plus Manyante. The input is Shivas plus Manyante, and the final output generated is Shiva Manyante, following the same procedure. Similarly, we have Shivas plus Ngavante as input. We apply the same procedure and derive the output in the form of Shiva plus Ngavante. Then we have Shivas plus Nakaraha, and the output generated following the same procedure is Shiva plus Nakaraha. Then we have Shivas plus Naha as the input, and the output generated is Shiva plus Naha, following the same procedure where same sutras apply. Then we have Shivas plus Jhashaha as the basic input, and then the sutras apply and the process happens, and the finally derived form is generated, namely Shiva plus Jhashaha with the 0 or deletion of Ya. Then we have Shivas plus Bharaha as the basic input, and the same procedure happens, and we get the final output in the form of Shiva plus Bharaha. Then we have Shivas plus Ghaghanti as the input, and the final output generated is Shiva plus Ghaghanti, following the same process. Then we have Shivas plus Dhaukante. The same process happens, and so we get the final output in the form of Shiva Dhaukante. Then we have Shivas plus Dharaha, and the same process is followed, and finally we get Shiva plus Dharaha. Then we have Shivas plus Jayaha. The same process happens, and finally we get Shiva plus Jayaha as the finally derived output. These are all the Hush, and there are the last 4 over here. Shivas plus Bandhaha, same process happens and the final output generated is Shiva Bandhaha. Shivas plus Gadanti is the next example where Sa is followed by Ga, that is Hush, and so we get the same process applied and the finally derived form is Shiva Gadanti. Then we have Shivas plus Damaravaha and the same process happens and then we get Shiva plus Damaravaha as the finally derived form. Then we have Shivas plus Deshaha as the basic input and finally we get Shiva plus Deshaha after we apply all the relevant sutras generating such next steps in the prakriya as are required for this sutra to apply. So we get Shiva Deshaha as the finally derived form. Similar question can be asked to these examples. Why is there no further sandhi? Like Deva plus Ahuhu, why is there no Devahuhu? Why Sabarna Dirgha sandhi does not apply? Similarly, Deva plus Iha, why is there no Guna sandhi? Similarly, Deva plus Edhante, why there is no Vruddhi sandhi? When stated specifically with reference to Edha, Etedha Tyutsu. Similarly, Deva plus Aushadham, why there is no Vruddhi sandhi stated by the Sutra Vruddhirechi. What it seems is that these are not allowed in the language and these are not explained explicitly as well. So why no further sandhi? And the answer is because users did not use it. But the question is, how does the grammar explain this fact? The grammar explains this particular fact by arranging the sutras in a way where the output of certain sutras is said to not to become the input for the other sutras. The output of the sutra in the Asiddha section, for example, does not become the input for any previous sutra. So here we see that the output of 8319, 0 in place of year, does not become the input for 6187, that is Guna, or 88 and 89 that prescribe Vriddhi. And that is why there is no further sandhi as per the explanation of the Paninian grammar as well. To summarize, we studied more substitutes in place of Ru, which was stated as a substitute of S at the end of a pada. They are Ya and 0. Several occurrences like Samaveta Yuyutsavaha, which is split as Samavetaha and Yuyutsavaha, they can be explained using the sutras that we have studied. So, Lopashakalya as well as Hali Sarve Sham. Due to the principle of the Asiddha using which the sutras are arranged in the grammar, absence of sandhi is explained by the grammar. Now we study the remaining examples and other cases which illustrate this particular Swadhi Sandhi more. Let us do it in the next lecture. Thank you for your patience.